Welcome to Amazon Legends, where we have real stories about making it big on Amazon. Our guests are CEOs of large companies and entrepreneurs who became power sellers, also providers specializing in helping sellers, aggregators that acquire sellers, and former Amazonians will give us an insight from behind the scenes. Here is your host, Nick Uresin.
Welcome to another episode of Amazon Legends. My next guest today has previously worked for Accenture, one of the largest companies in the world, in software development, and realized that he was better at business than developing software. So today he is the Senior Director of Client Strategy at NetElixir, which is an e-commerce growth partner. And when he is not working, he is what we call a young old soul. So he likes to be with his family and spend quiet time so that he can recharge his batteries and get back to growing their clients. So with that, everybody, meet my guest, Tauseef Syed. Welcome to the show, Tauseef.
Hi, Nick. Thank you so much for having me here, and a big hello to your audience.
It's a pleasure to have you. Someone who starts in software development but goes into business, I think that's a good move because you would have been miserable developing software.
I will agree with that, 100%.
Okay, so now when you and I connected, we discussed what we could discuss on the show, and with something that immediately stood out, and I believe this is what you do as a company at NetElixir, is growing your clients, and part of your growth is by selling on multiple channels. So it's one thing to focus on Amazon, but what do? Like, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You want to sell through multiple channels. Now, one thing that I always tell my clients is, look, if you want to grow your sales, stop thinking adding more products, because what you want to do is, before you go horizontal, you want to make sure you've gone as deep as possible vertically. And of course, when you create one product that's already a vertical direction, now you want to dig as much as possible and go across all the channels as much as you can before you add one more product and one more product, because every single item will come with its own requirements in terms of inventory, because whatever it is that you're selling, wherever you're selling, it's the same inventory that will service it all, right? So before you make that more complicated, just go through. So, and that's what we are going to discuss during this episode. We're gonna completely dissect how to go across multiple channels, what are some best practices and some policies that one should have. So tell me about your methodology in going across multiple channels.
I think the first thing that we recommend for any retailer and business owner is follow your audience, right? You follow your audience and understand their purchase behavior. Next, what you do is understand and experiment with channel-specific nuances. Every channel has some specifications you got to pay respect to. And lastly, you got to closely watch the moving parts.
Okay, so what you said is extremely significant. It sounds very simple, but my best example that I can give for this is, let's say that you're selling crayon pens for kids, right? So every kid likes to play with it, but if you put it in a clothing store, nobody is getting, that's not where the audience is, right? So you want to put it where the parents buy that kind of stuff, and that's what you're talking about. So you follow the audience. So I understand the audience, and I understand the second part that you mentioned, where what Amazon channel requirements, right? So Amazon is notorious with all their requirements. So every channel has their requirements. So understand that. So, but moving parts is where the the action is. So what are those moving parts?
So moving parts, what I consider is number one, the example that you just gave about crayon pants. Product and inventory is a big moving part, right? So on the product side, just understanding the nuances between products, the relationship between products, that becomes critical. Like your example is a good product bundling opportunity. That is a moving part in itself. Similarly, beyond product, you also have the competitive landscape. You got to pay attention to how is that landscape shifting. Once you have competition under control, you got to pay very close attention to your content strategy. What are you putting out there as a brand? What at a product level, at a description level, at a brand level, what is your content strategy? Pricing is a very important and a critical moving part. So having a right pricing strategy and then paying close attention to reporting, analytics, and AI in today's day and age. Those are the moving parts.
I see. Okay. So for everybody listening, you have just heard the entire roadmap to expanding across multiple channels. So first of all, as far as our methodology goes, figure out where your audience is. So everybody knows the next big marketplace is Walmart. Don't just go jump into Walmart. Maybe there is another channel that is more focused on where your audience is. So start with that. And then the next thing is whichever channel that you are targeting, then figure out what their requirements are, and then move on to the moving parts. Now, the reason why I wanted to go over this step 1 and 2 is because people say, okay, let's get aggressive, and then let's launch everywhere. That is not the right thing, right, Tauseef? You don't want to launch everywhere at once, right?
Iterative growth, that is what we strongly recommend, because business owners specifically, they know their products really well. If you are growing, start with experimentation first. Start slow. Start with you know what your best products are. Start with a small handful of products, but start with experimentation. That should always be the first step, and then let data be your guide, right? Based on what your performance numbers say. Sometimes it is not just, even with data, you have to know which metric to watch, right? Top line sales are fantastic, but many a times they are not the only metric that you should be paying attention to. Mm-hmm. So take a measured approach, experiment, and follow the data.
Yes, it's always the case. We have a $1 trillion company in front of us called Amazon, and everything they do is always data-driven and process-based. In other words, no one person comes in and says, okay, we're doing this because I feel like it, or I trust me. So no, nobody trusts anybody. They trust data, and then they let the data. By the way, I heard something from one of the former Amazonians. One of the requirements on Amazon is to have white background on images.
Yes.
He said, why do you think that is? He said, because the data shows that when an image has white background, it converts the best. So everything is data driven. Okay, so this means now you really have to do your research to figure out what channel is most suitable for your audience, and then figure out the channel requirements to set up an operation there, and then go from there. So now we're gonna go into the methodology as far as the moving parts. So the first one you mentioned is the same inventory services all the channels. Explain to us at a high level, how do you approach that? Deciding, how do I know, I'm producing or I'm buying 1,000 pieces. How do I know how many pieces to sell where?
Great question. There is no one fixed answer to this. It depends entirely on where you are coming from as a business. And for example, there may be somebody who has vertically captured a specific channel, let's say Amazon or the D2C side. They are great with it, but they have not forayed into other channels. So in that scenario, what we recommend is experimenting with their top sellers and foraying, start with a small percentage of inventory on the secondary channel. And then based on the success, grow from there. Vice versa, there could be an established brand who has a strong physical store presence and they are just foraying into the world of e-commerce, right? So now for this, in this specific scenario, the brand, everybody is already aware about the brand name. There is a high recall value. So they can experiment with a slightly larger volume and distribute it more evenly. So the answer depends on the journey that you have taken and where you stand today.
Yeah, so what you are talking about is the level of demand per channel, right?
Yes, level of demand per channel, and also pay attention to who are you competing with on those channels. Your competitors need not always be the same across channel.
I see. Okay. And how does that affect if you are competing with two different companies on two different channels? Does the nature of the competition in terms of their size, their heavy competition or a small seller, is that what you're looking at, or what is the criteria?
No, I'm looking at, so when you're looking at competitors, what we typically try to get to is market share. What is the percentage of market that you are capturing, and what are the competitive advantages that you have versus your competitive set?
I see. Okay.
And that is where I think, let's say if both competitors on both different platforms have a similar strategy and a similar approach, then it is easier for you. But if there is one competitor who has a different pricing strategy and your competitive advantages vis-a-vis this competitor are different, you have to take a channel specific look at it. So your approach to a channel is also to a certain extent dictated by who you're competing with, what is the pricing strategy of your peer set, and what is your market share with respect to your competition.
Okay. So the key word here is market share. So you're competing for market share. And if you are competing against somebody who has a larger share of the market and you're going up against them versus someone who has a smaller market share, then that's a different. I understand. There is one more thing here. So when I was a seller, so we were selling through our website as well as Amazon. So of course, Amazon always dominated the amount of sales as a percentage. And we had to come up with a prioritization in terms of which orders get shipped first. And that was a function of the channel. But frankly, we were not thinking competition. What we were thinking was, how will the channel treat us if we are shipping later than we could? So that's another part, because as you know, Amazon customers are fairly spoiled and Amazon demands high standards. So that's something that we were building into the consideration.
Very important metric to look at, and that is what you did was exactly what many other retailers do and what we also recommend, right? So here you're considering channel specific nuances. If you are delayed with delivery, especially on Amazon, you get penalized for it, and that opportunity cost of penalization is very high. It can mean anything from losing your buy box to bad customer reviews and many more, which I'm sure you're aware of. So that is a great example where your channel policies dictated your processes. But I'm sure it was also, like you said, backed up by sales volume. So your sales volume was higher on Amazon, and therefore your processes moved in that direction. Was that the case?
Yes, I mean, look, in our case, it was not that difficult, mainly because Amazon was like over 90% of our total sales. So, however, here is what we did. Nothing is as simple as saying, okay, this is it, this is the criteria. There's always several layers. So what we did was the following. We said, okay, first of all, Amazon orders get shipped first and foremost. But within the Amazon orders, we also had prioritization. And part of those layers actually came after our website orders. So, and that prioritization was, it was several layers. Number one, how many items were ordered? I'm talking about different SKUs. So it was much easier and faster to pick a single SKU order than multiple SKU order. So multiple SKUs versus single SKUs in terms of orders. The other thing was, what is the destination country? So that would then create multiple layers. So first we would go pick the US orders, and within those US orders, we would pick the single items. Then we would pick the multiple items. And then after we've done the US orders, single and multiple for Amazon, we would move on to the website orders. Then we would pick the website orders, same order, single, multiple, US. And then after the website orders were done, then we would move on to Amazon International, single, multiple, then website international, single, multiple. So that was our algorithm.
Wow. As you just reminded me of a very unique example of a scenario where shipping cost became a determinant factor for, we were trying on a budget, and we were on a cost-cutting mode for one of our clients, and we were trying to find any way and mean in which we can reduce cost without really impacting revenues. So what we identified was a big cost factor was shipping. Shipping was an important part of the cost, and the weight of the product was adding to it. So what we realized was, if we had to ship, by we I mean my client and partner, if they had to ship to nearer locations, the shipping cost was much lower, because the amount of, it was a food product. So the amount of dry ice that goes into packaging distinctly impacted the weight of the item being shipped out. So strategically, what we did was we diverted our media spend and budgets towards marketing and advertising in regions which are within a 1 day ground shipping to their warehouses, and that significantly impacted the shipping weight and thereby saving them on COGS. So though the revenues remained the same, cost was reallocated, the effect on margin was significant, and it made a big difference. So many a times, you have to pay attention to data, but knowing the processes, knowing what happens at the back end at a granular level is very important, because that is where those solutions lie.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's all about the moving parts. There's so many things. I mean, we can, shipping happens to be, look, at the end of the day, there is not much you can do about the cost of the product. Cost of the product is what you pay to buy it, and you are always looking for ways to save money, but at the end of the day, you cannot really do too much with the product. Amazon commission is Amazon commission. There isn't much you can do about that. Then that leaves you with two other costs. One is shipping or fulfillment. The other is advertising. So those are the areas of improvement that has the potential to improve. And the more you dissect your data, And the more layers you can create and then assign rules to those layers, the more cost savings you're going to have. And there's
And
no
I think
question.
along with dissecting the data, another important area with cost and long-term costs, I would say, is investing in experimentation. Right
Oh,
now, the way the landscape is evolving and moving, the technology disruptions are they are the rate at which we are seeing game-changing technologies have significantly shrunk. If you look back historically, when Google was launched, Google's shopping campaigns, previously long ago known as Frugal, then Facebook, Bing, Amazon, Instagram, all these were launched like a few years apart. But if you just look at the recent times, in the last 24 months, the rate of change has amplified to another level. We are all hearing about AI and technology, which is the game-changing, which is impacting the industry today. But if you take a pause and think back, Apple's iOS 14.5 update, which disrupted the industry, was less than 24 months ago. That looks like ancient history today. Because since then till date, there have been so many technology updates. Google had PMax, Amazon had all the fantastic updates with A10 and Premium A Plus and all that, and ChatGPT today. There's been so many changes happening. And as a retailer, if you're not investing in experimenting with things, then you're very quickly being left behind.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, this works very nicely with one of the latest features Amazon introduced, the experiments, right? So you can experiment with titles and bullets and A plus, and it's valuable. Okay, so let's go back. So there are so many ways to deal with, ultimately, we were on allocating your inventory. So tell me what you think. What I usually advise my clients is, I say, look, your inventory is what's servicing your entire business in terms of the channels that you sell through. So therefore, look at where your sales are coming from as a percentage, and then allocate that percentage to each channel as their share of inventory. So if you have 100 pieces in stock, 20 pieces goes to, let's say, eBay, 30 pieces goes to Walmart, 15 pieces go to website, and the rest goes to Amazon. And then stay within those. As a high-level strategy, what is your take on this kind of an approach?
So this is where I was saying, Nick, I think this is a great strategy when somebody is established, they have multiple channels that are working for them. But somebody who's foraying into a new channel, that is when they have to take best practices into consideration and start with, let's say, top selling products or top selling SKUs with a fixed 5% or 10% of their inventory when they are testing out a new channel. Right. But if it is an established, yes, they have 3 or 4 channels that are established. Yes, allocated based on where the sales are coming from. That is the thumb rule.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on to the competitive landscape. So tell us about how to assess the competitive landscape. How do you go about managing that?
So what we recommend paying close attention to is there are third-party tools out there that can give you inputs about who your competitors are within your product category. So we pay attention to product category share. If you look at the search marketing side of things in Google Ads, there are metrics available called impression share, click share. Those give a good direction into what is the competitive market share that you're capturing. We have access to a few tools which are more enterprise in nature and give us deeper KPIs where we can measure the share of voice, the average selling price movements by category. We also have access to, again, at NetElixir, we are a part of Google Leadership Circle that is about 27 agencies out of 7,000 plus agencies in US. So we get access to a lot of additional reports where we are able to measure the long-term movement of a client's market share with respect to their peer set. So those reports become in the long run very important because they help us understand how is a competitor or a retailer moving with time. Because in the initial part, it is easy to capture low-hanging fruits, but once you have done that, and you have a robust, well-oiled machine on your side, then it becomes important to find those incremental wins, and that is where paying attention to what your competitors are doing is helpful. But beyond reporting, right? Let's say somebody is doing it on their own; they don't have access to advanced reporting. I think it is very important to search for your own products on whichever channel that you are on, and identifying who are the other competitors who appear for similar search terms, right? Then you dive one step deeper and you can create almost like a comparison table on who are the competitors and what are the product at a product and feature level, where are you competing with them? Whether it is pricing, whether it is quality, whether it is content, what is their promotion schedule looking like, and what are their promotion calendars? Almost mapping it out and following your competition. That is, you don't need access to advanced tools and technologies. You can do that manually as a consumer.
Yeah. So this brings me to a bit of a dilemma in terms of how to go about doing this research, because there is this interesting concept about marketplaces, online marketplaces, and the listeners have heard me say this a few times in other episodes, where I say Amazon is not a marketplace of products; it's a marketplace of keywords. So what you are doing is, in fact, you are looking at keywords that are high in demand, and then you find a product that you can competitively source, or you come up with a product idea that you can develop to solve an underserved market within that keyword, to solve a problem that you can produce competitively.
You're going into the product development space almost, yeah, you're right. That if you can find an underserved market and you're able to source that product, you have a winning formula on your hands.
Yeah. Now, so my question is this, Tauseef. This means that we are not competing in a category. We are competing for a keyword. So the question is, then, do you analyze your competitive landscape in terms of category or in terms of search?
Great question. I think so far what we have been doing, and what I think is also something that I recommend, is at a category level. When you're putting your products together in any listing, right, whether it is Google, Microsoft, or Amazon, you're setting them up in buckets at a category level. You're defining which product goes into which category, right, within the product field. Now, yes, search terms are critical, very important, because that is where what users are searching. But at a category level, you are also competing with the products that are within the same category that have been segmented as a specific category. So we rely more on the category share, competitive landscape, because It is also an easier way to pull data reports and get some third-party information about how the category as a unit is doing, right? Because you have to pay attention to not just product level trends, but also what is happening with the category as a whole. Is the category expanding? Is the category shrinking? That is also important. And when you only look at keywords, that bigger picture is what you miss out on.
I
Right?
see. Yeah, you're right.
I,
I mean,
I,
yeah, I can
I
see
hope that
exactly.
long-winded answer was helpful and not more confusing.
No, 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 no. What you are saying is you can win the battle on those individual keywords, but lose the war because whatever category that particular keyword may be associated with,
That
that
may be,
category as a whole may be bleeding in terms of demand, right? That's what you're
so,
saying.
and that is where I think that is the second layer within the competitive landscape, right? Are you growing within a shrinking category? That is good. But if you are, in a category that is growing rapidly, and you are flat in terms of sales, that doesn't mean you have to pat yourself on the back. If you have grown by 5% and the category has grown by 20%, that means you have lost market share to somebody else. You cannot be patting yourself on the back for 5% growth. I'm just using hypothetical numbers, but that is where I think category has a bigger role to play in informing you about what is happening in the industry.
You know, you reminded me of a line from a movie, and it was a business-oriented movie, and two people were talking. One was more experienced, the other one was a bit of a newcomer, and the young guy was advocating, you know, we should do this, we should do that, we should do the other. And the guy was very quietly listening, and in the end he says, my boy, you should always be taking an increasing share of a growing market, not a growing share of a reducing market. So
that's so true.
That's exactly what you're talking about. You want to be always taking an increasing share of a growing market. And by just focusing on keyword, that's not possible because you're not seeing the big picture, right?
So keywords are important. I'm not ruling them out, but along with keywords, also pay attention to the category.
Yeah, cool. Okay, next one comes the content strategy. So walk us through how you go about developing that content strategy.
I think first and foremost area for content is creating a brand voice. What does your brand stand for? What does it mean? What are you trying to communicate with your audiences? And by audiences, I don't mean the demographic segmentation. I mean, who is your user, right? Or who are you trying to sell the product to? And ensuring that across the different channels that you have, you're remaining consistent in your brand voice, right? Because irrespective of where you're selling your product, your brand is a promise to your consumers, and that stays true across where you're selling. So that understanding what the brand is, I think, is the first part of the battle. The second is ensuring that playing within the requirements of the ecosystem. Amazon has different rules, Google has different rules. With your D2C website, you have more flexibility. But depending on where you are, you know, TikTok has completely different rules altogether. Depending on where you are, ensuring that your content is in compliance with those ecosystems while still communicating the ethos of your brand.
Mm-hmm. So the brand voice that you're talking about is about what the brand stands for, and or is it visual? So tell us a little bit about what brand voice entails.
Okay, so again, from a brand perspective, first and foremost is having a story of what is your brand, what are you there, what is the purpose of your existence, what you're doing. So that is one part of the brand. The second part is how are you communicating, what are the visuals that you're showing, what is the color palette that you're using, and ensuring that if you connect your language, is it friendly, is it professional, is it depending on who you're connecting with, how you are writing the verbiage. So those are the different aspects of brand that go into understanding and building the right content for the right platform.
I have something important for all my listeners. Sellers lose money on lost or damaged inventory with Amazon, which can add up to a lot over a year. Did you know that there is a way to claim all your losses? Getida is the global leader in Amazon FBA auditing and reimbursements for Amazon FBA sellers worldwide. They deliver results with no upfront costs. They get paid only when you get paid. Visit www.getida.com/legends to learn more and sign up. And thanks to our friends at Getida, your first $400 in reimbursements will be free. That's www.getida.com/legends. And that's www.getida.com/legends. I see some sellers, they're selling through their website and they're selling on Amazon, they're selling on Walmart, and they look totally different, all over the place, and there is no consistency. So that's a big deal. And also the message has to be clear and consistent. So people need to know. So that drives your content strategy. How about the products themselves? What is the best way to approach the content for the products? Because you have on Amazon, you have videos, pictures, bullets, descriptions, and all that stuff. So how do you go about developing that? Do you just copy paste across all the channels, or what do you do?
So some of the elements are used across the board. So for example, product specific images, that is where I think Amazon has set a high benchmark in terms of what works well. But typically along with those nuances, what we try to understand is instead of just showing the product from different angles, if you can show the features of the product, right, what it does and how it does, and that only the user, if you know who is the right user for your product, you'll have a fantastic understanding of it. So that we try to incorporate into visuals. In terms of the type of content, I think in terms of formatting, what Google product feeds requirements are and what Amazon's requirements are slowly merging together, right? They're not the same yet, but they are moving towards a more visual way of presenting data. Your product data is important. Your titles, descriptions, irrespective of the channel, are critical. Your product categorization is critical, but they are now also moving towards more visual mediums where you have some crawlable text, which is easy to read, which talks about functions of the product. And I think experimenting and finding those niches is very helpful. In fact, one of the videos that I was seeing on your channel the other day spoke about premium A+ content, and I love that hack where instead of trying to get 15 ASINs, one ASIN every 3 days, you keep updating, and 45 days later you have an approved premium A+ content. So just paying attention to those hacks and trying to make the most of now what you have is what I strongly recommend and aim to test with my clients.
Yeah, constantly be testing. So it's always, and also there are different ways. So I had another guest recently, and he said that whenever any kind of content that he is going to launch, what he does is he creates 2 different versions of it, and then he goes on Pickfu. And for those who are not familiar, Pickfu is pickfu.com. Pickfu.com is something where you can create a poll for an audience of your choosing. So you can say, okay, if your product is for women between the ages of 35 and 50 and so on and so forth, this kind of income and single, married, whatever the case may be, you create an audience and then you put a question. And your question can be about, okay, which picture would you click on to go to the product detail page? Or which picture would you click on? Which picture would convince you to make the purchase on the product detail page? So, but you have to be very careful with your question because it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy if you don't ask the right questions. So he was saying that he goes to PickFu and he starts with a popular response in the first place. He puts that on Amazon, then immediately he creates an experiment with a second version of that picture. So now between those two, so he's already started with a winner, and now he's testing different versions of whether it's the picture or the title or A+, it could be either one. So I said, okay, so constant testing. So he says then after the test is over, he makes the winner the permanent one. Now he creates another experiment to make a different version of the winner. So he says the test never ends. I should say the experiment never ends. You're always experimenting.
Always experimenting. In fact, we also recommend carving out a portion of the budget specifically to experiment with new ideas. Since you were talking about specific examples, I think PickFu is a good one. I would love to try it out. There are a couple that I personally look at. One is People Also Ask. That gives you peoplealsoask.com, I believe that's the URL. But it gives you questions. You can post about your product and those frequently asked questions, and you get some good content generation ideas from there. I also look at pexels.com, PEXELS, but that gives good visual, content which is copyright protected, etc. If you're looking to purchase or just get some lifestyle images, that is a good source.
Yeah, I had a guest. Anybody wants to go check out? His name is Norm Farah. Norm, everybody knows him as the beard guy. He has a long beard for years. So I said to him, how did this start? And he goes, well, just started and it became my brand. So that's his brand. So everybody knows him as the beard guy. Or he has a podcast called Lunch with Norm. I was on his podcast as well. So check out his episode. He shared some nuggets, and you mentioned one of those. It's a great nugget. He said, first and foremost, those questions and answers under every product on the product detail page, they are indexed. They are indexed. So he said, what you do is get someone to post a question, but come up with questions that will help you articulate a different feature of your product, and then get somebody to post a question. And then as the seller, you go in and answer. Of course, answer the question, but answer it with all the keywords that are important to you. So those questions and answers are so valuable to produce. Also, as you know, we look at the questions. We don't read the bullets so much and then say, oh, we go look at the reviews, look at the questions. So that was another nugget that you mentioned. These sites, people also ask.com, right?
I may be getting that the first site wrong. I can follow up with you with the full URL. Pixels, I'm very confident is the right one. People also ask, I'm probably getting confused with the feature on SEO, where you see those questions pop up in Google. So in SEO also, it is not just about the 10 blue links on page one anymore, right? There are lots of new features that are coming up. That is where FAQs and those people also ask questions that come through implementation of structured data are becoming more and more important. So I'll send you the URL post conversation, Nick.
Yeah, we'll post it with your contact information. Okay, so let's move on to the pricing strategy. So what can you tell us about pricing strategy across channels?
I think pricing is where you have to consider your margins. That is, everything from your cost of goods sold and what is your intention. Are you trying to penetrate a specific area? Do you have any MAP restrictions with the manufacturers, or are you setting any MAP restrictions? So those aspects have to be considered. Of course, if you are trying to penetrate a channel or a market, you can start with a competitive pricing. Such that you don't bleed money, but still are breaking even. With respect to pricing, the one area that we strongly recommend looking at is the lifetime value of your customers, right? What is the purchase frequency? What is the return rate? And based on and understanding, what are those products which are a good gateway product that lead to a high value customer down the road. Now, customers with the highest lifetime value. We have our own proprietary AI technology, which helps us automate some of these things, but you can you can do an RFM analysis of your sales and customers, look at the recency, the frequency with which they are purchasing, and of course, the monetary value, and identify your best customers, the customers with the highest lifetime value, and try and understand what is the first product that they ever purchased from your side. And once you have that, that is your gateway product. So with gateway products, what we recommend is, go in with a penetration strategy. So that you can be breaking even with gateway products, but for a fact that this leads to your best customers down the road. So this is just one example. There can be more such ways you have to look at pricing and segment it out.
Yeah. So you bring up something that happens to be one of my favorite methodologies. So I have to kind of clarify some of the things for the purposes of implementation, because some of the listeners may want to try it. So it's called the RFM method. RFM stands for recency frequency monitoring. So what that implies is, imagine that you have 100,000 customers on your 100,000 people on your mailing list, but you can only send 10,000 mail pieces. Which 10,000 would you pick out of the 100,000? So of course, you want to pick the ones that are most likely to make a purchase. So how do you know who is likely to make that purchase? So that's where the RFM method comes in. So the research shows that those who bought from you most recently are the most likely respondents to an offer. Because as time goes by, people forget, the loyalty deteriorates, so therefore recency is key. So what you do is you take your 100,000 people, and then you assign, you know the last time they purchased from you. You look at the earliest, you look at the latest date. Anything in between, you divide it up into 10 buckets. And then you assign the earliest one, 1, the most recent, 10. So 10 has the highest score. So those in that 10, those 10 buckets, those who have the score 10 are the ones that have bought from you the most recent period. Then you take another look at how many times those 100,000 people bought from you. And then you assign the number to each one. So now you've got the smallest number, which would be one, and the highest number, maybe somebody bought from you 8 times. You divide that up into 10 segments. Then you assign a score. So now what you got is those who score 10 are the ones who bought from you most frequently. Maybe you assign, I don't know, between 6 and 8, you assign 10, and so on and so forth. So then you look at how much money each one of those 100,000 people spend. The smallest one maybe spend $50. The highest one maybe spend $2,000. You divide that up into 10 blocks. Assign a score 1 to 10, 10 being the highest spender. Now you've got a bunch of customers who have the score 10. Well, guess who those 10,000 people will be? Those who had the score 10 in all recency, frequency, and monetary. And those guys are the highest likely ones that will respond to your offer. And nobody may score 10 in all 3. Then you work your way backwards. Okay, just include 10 and 9 where the recency has the premium. So does that kind of cover what you were talking about when you said recency, frequency, monetary?
You took me back to school, Nick. This was like going back to school and listening to a professor. Absolutely 100% on point. That is the RFM model explained very well for your audiences. And yeah, I think you should also be a professor, Nick. You'll make it very good.
Professor of nothing. I'd rather be talking to people and discussing these things. I value that more. So okay, cool. I have one key question for you on the pricing strategy. Do you sell the item at the same price across all marketplaces, or do you change it per marketplace?
I don't think you can sell the same product at same price across the board. Yes, within the marketplace ecosystem, there will be overlap between Amazon and Walmart specifically SKUs. But I would strongly recommend looking at SKU level profitability there. So in some, you can start off with same, but apart from your top movers, if you look at others, over time you have to make changes, and you have to give every marketplace its due respect. Otherwise, the tricky part is if you have too much of a difference between the two, then you're leaving your users with a bad taste in the mouth. So you have to be within a specific range. That's what we look at. But when we are defining the pricing of a marketplace, what we try to get to is SKU level profitability. How is that SKU doing on that specific marketplace, and then see if we can move, make some movement in the pricing to adjust it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I always am cautious about is be careful discounting, because it's very hard to increase once you discount. Yeah. So especially with Amazon watching other marketplaces, if your Amazon price is lower, no problem. But if Amazon price is higher than another marketplace where you're selling it cheaper, Amazon will take away the buy box, and that will impact your conversion rates. And then it will be a long time before you get back in the buy box, unless you reduce your price. And they won't even tell you where they saw that price. They just simply, it's automated. It will take you off, right?
9 out of 10 times the lowest price is Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they don't want you selling it at lower somewhere else. Yeah. So, all right, this is great discussion. Just quickly, also, I want to cover the reporting and analytics part. So what is your approach on that?
I think reporting and analytics is the piece that is closest to our heart. With respect to analytics, we, like I had mentioned earlier, we have our own analytics AI solution called Elixir Insights that essentially looks at the purchase behavior of customers and segments them into categories. Who's your high value customer? Who's your mid value customer? Who's your low value customer? And then there are some predictive analytics that are built into it as well. So, not just restricting to the NetElixir analytics capabilities, but from a business standpoint, I think few areas that you have to pay very close attention to. One is your top line revenues and your returns. What is your return on ad spend? What is your return on investment? What is your profit margin? So top line sales are fantastic, but you have to add a layer of margin on top of it, right? And then, like you rightly said, sometimes if you are being more profitable at a lower sale volume, that may be a better situation to be in, right? So with analytics, I think the easier or the more simplified version that I would say is pay attention to where your costs are going and where you are driving in your sales from. And the more deeper that you can get into it, the better. You have to have your pulse on the moving parts, especially cost and revenue are the two very basic metrics that you have to pay attention to. We watch the CPC rates closely. What are you paying, especially on advertising costs? What are you paying, and what is the product that you're selling? What is the profits that you have made from your product sales, not just top line sales, because ROAS is a good metric to watch, but it can be dicey where it may not show you the full picture always.
Right. So yeah, I mean, this is so right. Everybody looks at their advertising, their PPC, what is my ROAS, but ROAS doesn't really matter. What you want to look at is what we call TACoS, total advertising cost of sale. So that means that including your organic, your external, as well as your paid, combined, how much are you generating from that SKU as a whole, and then compare that against your ad spend. So of course, when you're doing multiple channels, then you want to look at your revenue per channel, and then your spending per channel, and then also as a whole, because one channel may be doing less than the other, but combined, what is your ROAS, your TACoS, and your margin and everything else across all channels?
Another metric that I find very valuable, especially when you're trying to grow and acquire more customers, is CAC, cost of acquired customer, right? Per customer, what have you invested in acquiring them as a customer? So you'll have cost per lead, cost per conversion, but at the end of the day, what is the total that you have spent on acquiring a customer, and what is the LTV? Is that a positive or a negative number? So in the growth phase, that is also something you got to watch closely.
Yeah, I mean, in online business, those who watch Shark Tank, I'm sure they've heard Mr. Wonderful immediately asks, anytime an online business comes, or a business that distributes through online, it always says, what's your customer acquisition cost? Immediately, that's the first question. So you mentioned LTV, that's the lifetime value. So think about this. It's very simple. If you don't know your customer acquisition cost, you don't know your lifetime value of a customer, it's a non-starter. Find those out first. And then once you find those out, so over the life of that customer buying your product, how much are they likely to spend? And then how much are you paying to acquire that customer? So right there, you've got a metric. It's a percentage. Customer acquisition cost versus LTV. The smaller that number is, the better for you. If you're spending 10% of the lifetime value on acquiring it, that's a great thing. If you're spending 35%, that's not a good thing, especially if the lifetime is 6 months. That means you're going to spend, right? The first 2 months, everything that you get from the customer will go. So these are the kinds of things that you want to be careful. I mean, reporting and analytics discussion happens to be my favorite, but it takes a long time to discuss. But I think we covered at very high level important things to watch as far as your total advertising cost of sale, as well as your customer acquisition lifetime. These are important metrics. So, Tauseef, I want to now move on to my favorite part of the show, which is to learn all about you. And, I always tell people I have zero interest in your professional bio, so to speak, but I'm more interested in your life experiences growing up as a kid that put you in the world of business. You could have become a lawyer, a doctor, a social worker, but instead you are here. So what led you here? So tell us, start from the beginning. Tell us where you grew up and when was the first time that you got this business interest?
Very interesting question, because honestly, I don't think I have prepped anything for this part of the conversation. But I grew up in India, a city called Hyderabad, a big foodie, and that also probably comes from the city where I was born. It is known for its delicacies. Growing up, I don't think there was ever a business intent or anything of that sort. But one thing that I did see was I saw my father go through, he was in an aviation industry, right? So I have seen him go through the entire impact of technology on that industry. There was a time, where every air ticket used to be written by hand. And, during my formative years, that is how things were. And by the time I grew up, I saw everything was automated and everything was technology driven. So I think that flair for technology, that was probably the spark, I can say, where I saw some changes happening, and technology was an important part of the process. The need for buying an air ticket probably is still the same: leisure, work, or you need to get somewhere. But the way of doing it has evolved and significantly changed. So that was a very interesting aspect for me. Then, I did my engineering, I got into technology, and Accenture happened. And what I very quickly realized was I'm more than building the technology part of it. I'm more inclined towards solving a business, understanding the business. Solving came later with experience, but understanding what happens on the business side of things, that was very intriguing for me. So then I did my master's, and NetElixir happened. I've been with NetElixir for 10 plus years now. And it has been an incredible journey. I think learning about how different businesses are, even today, it is a learning experience. Landscape is shifting and evolving, and you have to keep up. So what keeps me excited is the world of business is unique, where you're solving a problem and it has a real world impact. So that keeps me excited and keeps me going day in and day out.
So you saw your father with the plane tickets, the airfare tickets. So yes. What was he doing? What was the part that appealed to you?
I think what appealed to me was typically, the challenges that were there 5 years ago or 10 years ago. You're working with he was in the corporate side, so he used to work with businesses who needed to travel. So your relationship with the same business team has remained the same, but the way of doing things has completely evolved, and the structures, the rules of the game shifted. And I think one of the first industries to get impacted by this technology innovation was probably aviation. I may be wrong, but that is at least my impression. And just watching him handle those moving parts and constantly, with the same people that he's working with, but still there's a lot of learning involved. That fascinated me. It was, why is it not a cyclical process? What has changed, and how has things moved. It was very intriguing, and at a young age, I probably never fully understood the grasp of it. But just watching him go through those learning moments probably sparked something deep inside.
So was he I mean, I remember those days where you had to have a travel agency, and then travel agency would arrange the tickets, and you would call back and forth, oh no, there isn't one available on this day, on that day. It was a painful process, but that was it. So this must have been a struggle for him if he's dealing with business customers. So what was your were you close to your father?
Yes, I am still fortunate to and blessed to still have him in my life, and yes, we are close. I think one good example I remember is I think they were called ABC books or something, but big fat books that basically said which airline goes from which place to which place.
Yes.
Lots of paperwork, stamping required. Now everything is available at a click of a button. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So go through the hoops was helpful.
This is interesting because I ask always, I'm always interested. And so what happened in your case was, what I'm reading from everything I heard is, obviously, being close to your father, you did not like the fact that he was struggling. He had his job, but it wasn't an easy thing. And then over time, when you saw those challenges disappear, then you gravitated towards the solutions and producing solutions, and all because of the kind of impact that, if those things existed back then when you were a kid, your father wouldn't have suffered as much, right?
Likely, I don't think consciously I have made those connects, but one thing I do understand and know is I have always tried to find solutions, see if I can, roll up my sleeves and solve things. That has always been an attempt that I have gravitated towards. So maybe I'll have to go to a therapist to find out, but. That could have been the case. So I remember being influenced a lot by watching him struggle, and I think if you see your loved ones going through challenges, you probably will do what you can to see what you can, if you can solve it.
That's exactly it. So if you are it's one thing to be solution oriented, but where does the interest come from for that solution? And I can see exactly where it comes from. It comes out of care and love and care you have for people who can actually use that solution. So this is a great.
I think I'll also say one last item here. Like, I think having that love and care, also finding a place where you can nurture that. So one thing that I'm proud of at NetElixir, where I am, is with our clients, with our partners, we are often celebrating like long tenure relationships, primarily because there is that care involved in ensuring that we are doing everything we can to solve challenges. Oftentimes, growing is you cannot grow alone. That is where I think building that expertise and forming the right relationships has helped.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, nothing in life happens all by yourself. You always have to have people around you. So tell us, how can people reach you, share your contact information with us?
Thank you so much for having me here, and I wish your audience the very best. You can reach me at tauseef.syed@netelixir.com. I also had a couple of giveaways for your team and your listeners.
Sure.
First and foremost was a scorecard. You can go to scorecard.netelixir.com. If you have a Google Ads account and you want a DIY scorecard of how it is performing, you can go in there, punch in, you can log into your account and you can get a ready-made scorecard of how your campaigns are performing. Secondly, we are also heavy into education, and similar to what Nick, you're trying, I would love to invite you and your audiences to a webinar we are having with Professor Jerry Wind. Now, Professor Wind is the founding director of Wharton's strategic think tank, and he is one of the original legends in marketing. And he's also a sitting board member with Emilia, an AI company. So if you're interested in learning more about AI and the innovations that are disrupting the space, you're most welcome to join our webinar happening on May 18th. You can register at netelixir.com/webinar. I'm happy to share the details with you, Nick, and you're most welcome to join us.
Great. Thank you very much, Tauseef. This is most valuable, and I'm sure people will take you up on it. And everybody go to scorecard.netelixir.com and you can get an assessment of how you are performing on Google Ads. And with that, thank you, Tauseef. This was great to have you and have us go through the important parts.
Have a fantastic day, Nick, and thank you so much for having me here.
Before we wrap up, don't forget to visit www.getida.com/legends to learn more and sign up to claim money for your lost or damaged inventory with Amazon. Your first $400 in reimbursements will be free. www.getida.com/legends, and that's www.getida.com/legends. Thank you, and this brings us to the end of another episode, and I'll see you on the next one.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the episode, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too.